difficult to know what to do with that information, right? To process the information, to discriminate which information is true and which information is false. Even that's not that difficult. Even though today we're all so inundated with information, a lot of us are literally our information overload. We're information intoxicated. We just know too much. The world allows us to know so much. You're able to see me. The camera sees me because you can move it to the side. They want to see me better.
I don't really know what the issue with that is.
Okay, good. Well, the issue with my camera. It's right in front of it. It's blocking it. Just move it to the side and it'll be better. Does that work? I can't see.
No, I think the camera's messed up because it looks
okay.
It's broken. Yeah.
Okay, well, I call it an anti-Semite. Anything that doesn't work is an anti-Semite.
All right.
Keeps me busy. As long as I deflect, we're good. The guy just died on you. I don't know what happened to him. So to figure out
we're good.
what information is true and relevant is harder than simply collecting information. But then there's something called wisdom. Wisdom is intuitive information. Wisdom is the kind of information that mathematics, that science, that an orderly formed method of problem solving simply doesn't provide. And wisdom comes from the soul. Wisdom comes from the neshama. But wisdom is enhanced our ability to be wise and to have a sense of what's true and false and right and wrong in complicated situations has to do with how we live. If a person lives a life that's very superficial, if a person lives a life that's very material, if a person lives a life that's very showy. So when they come to situations where they need their guts, need their insides, their viscera to make a call, they don't have access. If people live refined lives, purer lives, lives that are based more on principle and some degree of purity and refinement, so the access to the wisdom tool, the ability to have intuition, is increased. In other words, the smartest people aren't always the most right. Sometimes the smartest people are the most wrong. The people who are the most right are the people who are closest to the truth. And the truth is God. And the truth is righteousness. And for that, smart helps, but it doesn't always, it's not enough. You have to have wisdom. And some people are smart, some people are wise, yeah, but a Rebbe has got another set of tools altogether. Beyond intelligence, beyond the ability to discriminate between what knowledge is useful and not useful, knowledge is true and knowledge is false. And even beyond the ability to intuit, it means to know things that are intellectual, but they're not intellectual. You have to just judge from your guts. There is something called the neshama, soul. Using words which you could relate to, we call it divine inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh. There's room on this table for you to put your extra things down so that you could be comfortable. I'm not trying to make you more uncomfortable. I'm just letting you don't got to have a whole, whatever the spot's for you. There's such a divine inspiration, a sense of the world based on in tuneness with the neshama, with the soul. The neshama is godly. The neshama is godliness. I don't know how godliness works, you know what? Because I don't have access to that level of me. The best I can do is use my brain. And unfortunately, when it comes to intuition, I don't have such good intuition. A Rebbe is in touch with his soul the way you're in touch with your brain. It's a whole different, it's like a sixth sense. People talk about in the animal kingdom, other animals that have six senses. It's very, very hard for us to know this because we only have five. So we're studying an animal and they're showing us indications that they're using some kind of technique, using some kinds of organs to assess their environment, using other things other than hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, and touching. We don't know what we see. We decide, this animal has a sixth sense. We don't know. It's a word that we use. The neshama is a sixth sense. The soul knows in a very different way. And how the soul knows, I don't know, but the soul knows on a higher level, a different plane. A Rebbe lives there. That's what a tzaddik is. A Rebbe, he's got a great brain, he's got a great heart, has an incredible set of senses, of eyes and ears and nose and mouth and hands and feet. In other words, he's a very, very developed human being. But What distinguishes him from the rest of us is that in addition to all of that, he has access to a different dimension of what a human being is that allows him to know things literally on the level of the spirit. Or to say it in perhaps different words, I'll wait for you to sit down. Guys, we're in the middle of a class. Let's find our seats quickly. My neshama is smart, but I'm only smart if my neshama goes into my brain, because I only use my physical brain to manifest the intelligence within my soul. My heart, and I know this is a bit of a question, but we'll leave it for different time. My heart is impassioned. My heart can be excited, yes. But my heart is only going to be excited if the passions in my soul are going to rest in my heart. Meaning to say, my neshama is available to me only through my body. Imagining having access to the neshama, not through the body, direct. That's what a soul means. That's what a neshama means. That's what a Rebbe is. It's just a different person. Hashem gave him all kinds of tools. God gave him gifts that we don't have. But in addition to all the gifts God gave him, he worked incredibly hard. A Rebbe, a tzaddik, is a human being who, first of all, is a servant of God. I mean, you guys are growing up in Lubavitch. You've never seen him at the Rebbe. So you get a diet, you get a brainwashing of a Rebbe all day and all night. He was such a great man. He was such a smart man. He was such a nice guy. All the wonderful things they tell you about the Rebbe. I think there's two things they never tell you. Number one, he wasn't always a nice guy. He could be pretty tough when he needed to be, very tough when he needed to be. And number two, the Rebbe's maximum toughness was directed at self. The Rebbe pushed himself. The Rebbe pushed his body in an indescribable way. The Rebbe's wife testified that the man fasted before he became a Rebbe, when he was a nobody living in France and living in Germany, fasted all the time. He never ate. He never slept. She was married to him. And within 3-4 months of their wedding, there's a whole exchange of letters between the Rebbe's wife and the Rebbe's father, where she complains to the Rebbe's father, the guy don't eat. I married this young man. He's very handsome. He looks quite down to earth. But when you know him really well, he doesn't eat. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't look after his body. And the Rebbe's wife, the Rebbetzin Chaimushka, complained to the Rebbe's father, I need you to tell him that when it comes to his physical body, I'm in charge. He can do all the religious stuff he wants, but I got to feed him. I got to clothe. I have to make sure that he stays alive and stays healthy. And I don't think the Rebbe took that advice quite well. He told his father it's none of his business. He told his father that his wife didn't have the right to share that information. It's private between a husband and a wife. The Rebbe's avoided with himself. You don't hear about that. And it puts you in a position where you're missing a very important link in understanding the health, the groundedness of the Chassid Rebbe relationship. A Rebbe is, first of all, a servant of God. And we try to do our best to be servants of God. He does far better. He drives himself. He pushes himself. He has no mercy on his body. You know the story that a Yid once told the Rebbe, it seems to me that you're fasting today. And the Rebbe's reaction was, you can tell. The man knew the Rebbe was fasting because he refused to drink water. But the Rebbe was saying, you can see it on my face. In other words, am I that tired? Am I that exhausted? Is there so much fatigue that there's physical symptoms of my fasting? And what the Rebbe was implying was that if people could see I'm fasting, maybe I'll stop. We don't always get that part. And I think getting that part is important, because to understand the Rebbe, you have to first understand his personal avodah. The Rebbe is a Jew who, as a human being, pushed himself and drove himself in every way. Hashem gave him an incredibly powerful guf, because what the Rebbe did to his body, a human being can't live. You never live until 90. You can't live to 20. He broke that body and pushed that body. By the time the Rebbe became a Rebbe, when he was almost 50 years old, that body was so purified, that body was so halified, that body was such a tool for godliness in the highest levels. This is what a Rebbe is. But being a Rebbe means being in touch with the soul. And when you come in the proximity of a Rebbe, when you go to the oil, what happens is you read a piece of paper, you say a bunch of words, and that's about it, right? You leave the note and you hope that something magic is going to happen. Everybody tells this is a special place. You come back a second time and a third time and a fourth time because you see that when you visit the oil, something happens. I personally, when I go to the oil, I feel I feel peace. In the Rebbe space, I feel such harmony and such peace. And I find it so ironic because the Rebbe was the ultimate pusher. The Rebbe didn't make you feel comfortable. He made you feel quite uncomfortable. When you visit the Oyel, when you go into that little space, you feel this incredible peace. That's just my experience. But what's really transpiring is you're in the space of the Rebbe's guf, the Rebbe's body. The neshamas are meeting. The neshamas, the souls, are meeting on a level which doesn't require a body. You can't use your mind without your brain. You can't use your emotion without your heart. You can't use your power to see. I'm talking about this, the power to see in the soul without the eyes. You can't use the power to hear without the ears. But there are powers of the neshama that don't need the guf. They're outside of the guf. And they meet directly. It's called neshama and neshama ne'etzeles. One soul and another soul touches one another on the level that we call atzilus. I mean, you've been in this school for a while, so you've probably come across the word atzilus. Atzilus, bria. Bria means the brain. Yetzirah means the heart. Asiya means the body. Atzilus means the soul direct. You go to the oyel, the neshama of the visitor and the neshama of the Rebbe meet, where there's no need for a body to create that meeting. Now, we don't experience it because we're not solistic, you understand? We're not sensitive to our neshama. But the Rebbe lives there. And the neshama of the Rebbe meets the neshama of every person. The Rebbe would come into a room, and there's 10,000 people. And his soul felt every one of them. And somehow, he was able to hold them all. You know, after 5 people, I'm dizzy. After 10 people, I'm confused. After 50 people, I forgot everybody. The Rebbe's capacity to hold people was incredible. He never forgot anything. But that's only his brain. On the neshama level, they walked into a room, there were tons of people. His soul tapped into the soul of each person. I don't know how that works because I don't got one of those. But that's how the Rebbe operates. That's how the Rebbe relates. That's how the Rebbe interacts with us. And that connection lifts us up. That connection makes us better. That connection moves us towards taking our religious life, our daily religious life, far, far more seriously. In any case, I started in the middle of the speech, okay? I want to sort of start from the beginning. I want to give you a little bit of background. There's an old Chabad expression that says, it's a Yiddish expression that says, a Rebbe is a geborene Zach, nicht ka geworene Zach. You don't become a Rebbe because there's a vacancy. That's not how it works. You know, the United States, he's the president, his term ended, or chas v'sholom, something else happened to him, so you put somebody in a seat, whatever it is, the vice president, the secretary of state, the chief justice, whatever the order of succession is. You don't fill the position of a Rebbe because there's a chair. You either got it or you don't got it. A Rebbe is God creates Rebbes. God creates these massive souls, massive neshamas that are from a different world altogether and plants them in this world strategically over the course of history, just enough to keep the Jewish people alive. Moshe Rabbeinu was such a soul, yeah. David HaMelech was such a soul. There are many of them, but not that many, you understand? The Eibush Almighty planted the Rebbe right after the Holocaust in a world of Jews that was very, very broken. And it was also reeling. It was spinning out of control. And the direction was only down. It was only negative. It was only sad. It was only self-pitying. And this man came into this world and he began to push us up, to make us positive, to push us up, to push us up, to push us up. And one person at a time, he got us to believe him. He got us to believe him that there is a future and that it's bright and they were allowed to think positively, we're allowed to think about tomorrow, not just about yesterday. And he healed a generation of Jews. He turned their minds around towards positivity and towards the future. And he gave wisdom and he gave very, very practical advice to help people one at a time figure out how to redirect their lives towards the future. We are now 73 years in. And the Jewish world is a very, very different Jewish world than it was in 1950. And it's impossible to imagine. It really is. It's impossible to imagine how the Jewish world would look if you just take this one man out of our post-Holocaust world. It's unfathomable. We think Lubavitch, only one community, there's other communities. The Rebbe was the torch for all the leaders of other communities, whether they admitted it or not. They drew strength from here. I was at a Fabrengen last night, and late in the night, a rabbi tells me a very interesting story. One of the most prominent Hasidus in New York is called Bobov. They number thousands of families today. So he tells me, this rabbi, he used to work with me in yeshiva, that in 1952, someone that he knew was standing in the hall outside the Rebbe's room, and he could overhear in the Rebbe's room a man talking to the Rebbe in Yiddish with a Galician accent, with a Hungarian Yiddish, and he's crying. He's really, really upset. And he hears through the door, you know the story? He hears through the door how the Rebbe says to this young man, "Junger man weinisht. Et wart vadir a meluche äußeren schwel." Young man, stop crying. A kingdom is awaiting you outside the threshold of this door. And this Yid who's repeating the story is outside, and he hears these words. And the Yechidus goes on, and this man continues to cry. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, the door finally opens, and out emerges the Baba Rebbe. And as he's standing by the door, the Rebbe says to him, "Remember what I told you. There's a kingdom awaiting you on the other side of the threshold of this door." The Baba Rebbe became a very successful Rebbe. What a story. I'm just giving this as an illustration. The Rebbe carried the Jewish people. I'm biased, and I'm brainwashed, and I'm closed-minded, and I'm not objective. This is the unobjective, objective truth. The Eibishter planted this Rebbe, and he turned the Jewish people's psyche around, and he lifted us up. And his job is not finished. You understand? His job is, he's so busy. He's busier now than he ever was, and we see his influence wherever we look. We see his presence all over the world. And this is why we mark this date, Yud Shevat. It's not a once upon a time. It's not a once upon a time. It's a here and a now, and an us. I always tell people that we sit around and talk about the Rebbe. We're not talking about the Rebbe. We're really talking about ourselves. When we talk about the Rebbe, we're not talking about the Rebbe. We're talking about who I am because of him. And that's really, it's always true. And it's especially true on a day like today. But anyway, let me see if I can try. Let me try a third time if I can start from the beginning of the story. The key point of all of this talking in circles is to understand that a Rebbe is not just a coincidence. This doesn't happen. Everything that happens in the world is by the divine hand. God does it. But the big stuff that happens in the world, he certainly does. And the Baal Shem Tov was a big stuff, you understand? The Baal Shem Tov was a huge person, a huge soul, incredible soul, planted logistically by God Almighty in the world close to 300 years ago, who initiated and fathered and inspired what we call today Chassidus as a whole. And he brought with him a whole bunch of these incredibly powerful souls. And he planted them over a period of whatever it is, 250 years, to give the world the koyach that we would need to survive really the darkest period in our history. You could make a good case that the last 250 years have been the hardest and the darkest in our history. It's hard to say that because there's a lot of dark and a lot of hard, but this has been very hard, very dark. And these tzaddikim carry the Jewish people. They carry the Jewish people. And these neshamas, these incredibly great souls, are planted, they're placed where they're placed to do what they need to do to hold us. So here's a story. There was a Jew who lived in Shanghai, China. He was the rabbi of Shanghai, China. His name was Amir Ashkenazi. He was a Lubavitcher Chassid. He learned in Lubavitch. I don't know how, but he had in his possession an original manuscript, a Ksav Yad Kodesh, an original manuscript of a talk of the previous Rebbe. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose name was Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, whose yahrzeit is today, spoke very briefly. His talks were very short, but he wrote very elaborately. Our Rebbe wrote very short and talked very long. The previous Rebbe wrote very short and talked very short, wrote very long. So he could sit at a Fabrengen, speak for 5 minutes, and then when you give him the transcript, he took a pen, he X'd out what he wrote, turned over the page, and he wrote 25 pages of what he meant to write. So a lot of the previous Rebbe's talks he wrote himself. Meir Ashkenazi somehow had an original manuscript of the previous Rebbe's of Fabrein. In that Fabrein, there's a story. There was a chassid whose name was Reb Nechemia Dubrovna, Reb Nechemia of the city of Dubrovna, which is someplace in Russia. Reb Nechemia Dubrovna was a very, very great chassid. He had been by the Alter Rebbe as a young man. He was from the greatest chassidim of the Mittel Rebbe. And when the Tzemach Tzedek became a Rebbe, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe became a Rebbe, he did not go to the Tzemach Tzedek. Why not? They were study partners. They were buddies. They were chavedim. They grew up together. And he had the same kind of mind, an incredible great mind. And here the Tzemach Tzedek studied tighter together, and he just couldn't imagine himself becoming a disciple of his former study partner. They were equals. Anyway, he has a dream. And he sees the Alter Rebbe, his first Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe says to him, why don't you have a Rebbe? So Rabbi Chaim Rebbe says, what do you mean, why don't I have a Rebbe? Because God took him. You passed away, your son passed away, I'm out of Rebbes. And the Alter Rebbe said to him in the dream, which is repeated in the Sichim, go to Lubavitch, there's a Rebbe there for you. And then the Rebbe adds, the previous Rebbe writes that the Alter Rebbe says in the dream, Menachem b'hoive, Menachem b'osid. Menachem now and Menachem later. Menachem in the future. He was living in New York and Queens when the Frierdiker passed away. When the Frierdiker passed away, anybody with half a brain knew who the next Rebbe is. It wasn't even a question. There are all kinds of reasons why all of this was delayed. The Rebbe Rayat, Frierdiker passed away on Shabbos. The funeral was on Sunday. Tuesday, he already visited the cemetery. 2 days after the Levaya, 3 days after the passing of the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe made his first of thousands of trips to the Tzin, of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Not only was no oil, there wasn't even a tomb, there was just a mound of earth. There's photos of the Rebbe visiting, those early visits. There was a Jew who knew the Rebbe from Riga, from Latvia, from 20-something years before, whose name was Harav Yitzchak Duba, Rabbi Yitzchak Duba. He was older than the Rebbe, considerable than the Rebbe. He was in New York, and he went with the Rebbe to the previous Rebbe's resting place, Tuesday, the 13th day of the month of Shvat, in the year of 1950. I would imagine that the Rebbe cried enough tears to make the ground look white. But the Rebbe did what he had to do. He read his pay. He had a bunch of stuff to do. And when he was finished, the Rebbe stepped away from the previous Rebbe's grave in order to go back to the car. When he steps away, Rabbi Dubov steps forward, and he says to the Rebbe in Yiddish, until now was the Rebbe, and now it's you. It was 3 days after the period Rebbe passed. He was the first person to tell the Rebbe, until now was the Rebbe, and now it's you. So the Rebbe snapped back. The Rebbe leapt. Don't even think about it. The Rebbe's alive. Don't even think about it. The Rebbe's living. Don't even think it. So there's a whole story how the Rebbe became a Rebbe. But this Rabbi Ashkenazi was living in Queens, and he had the Sikh in his possession. So when he started to hear that the Rebbe is balking at the possibility, when the Rebbe came to 770, and he had a problem. I'll tell you what his problem was. The Rebbe had a habit of taking things and not giving them back. Especially these kinds of things. He wanted the Sikha back. So he said, listen, Rebbe, I want to show you something, but I need you to tell me before I give it to you that you're going to return it to me. And in those times, he was able, later on, the Rebbe took something, he kept it, and forget, you were very happy for the Rebbe to have it. He wanted it back probably because in case the Rebbe would deny it, he wanted able to show it to someone else, So he showed the Rebbe the Sikha. The Rebbe gave it back to him. And the Rebbe thanked him for it. And the Rebbe sort of decided that this wasn't enough of a proof, a story with the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe comes to a dream, and we know the story because the previous Rebbe tells it. Menachem now, Menachem later. This is a story. There's another story with this same Rabbi Ashkenazi, which is not that important, but also fascinating. In Israel, there was a holy rabbi. You cannot say enough times holy before you say his name. He was a piece of godliness. His name was Rabbi Aaron Rekech, the Belzer Rebbe, the holy, holy, holy Belzer Rebbe. You read about him, and you don't know how the man lived. He never ate, never slept. He was a shtickle akus. The Rebbe met him, and the Rebbe spoke about him with real reverence. But Reb Meir Ashkenazi, this same Rabbi Ashkenazi's parents, hosted the Belzer Rebbe when he ran away from the Nazis in 1944. He was living in Hungary. And when the Nazis took over Hungary, he escaped Hungary through He went south. He went through, I don't know what countries there, Romania, Yugoslavia, Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine. He went on land. He didn't go by sea. And when he came to Israel, he had no place to stay. The Ashkenazis had a very large apartment, and they hosted him for 3 months. So when he left, he said goodbye, and he said, "Do you need anything?" So they told him, "Yeah, we have a son living in Shanghai," and they didn't even know he was alive. Because Shanghai was a war-torn city at that point. So they tell the Belzer Rebbe, "We have a son in Shanghai, and we're worried about him." So the Belzer Rebbe tells them, when he comes to Israel, tell him to come and see me. So they knew for sure he's alive, because the Belzer Rebbe knew everything. There were no mistakes with this man. Anyway, he comes to Israel after the war, and they send him to see the Belzer Rebbe. The Belzer Rebbe lived in Tel Aviv. The Belzer Rebbe wanted to live amongst the Freie Yidden, Dafke, amongst the secular Jews. That was his thing. He didn't live in Yerushalayim, he lived in Tel Aviv. And people waited for weeks to go see the Belzer Rebbe. But this Meir Ashkenazi comes in the house and says, the Belzer Rebbe asked to see me. So they put him right to the front of the line. He went into the Belzer Rebbe. The Belzer Rebbe was happy to see him. They farbrenged a little bit. And the Belzer Rebbe asks him, "Do you have any needs? Do you have any needs?" He says, "No, I'm good." "You sure? There's nothing that you need?" He said, "Well, I'm having trouble with my eyes. My eyes are bothering me." "Your eyes are bothering you? Here's the solution. You should always make Havdalah and Kiddush yourself on red wine, which is a known segula for eye problems. You should never eat dairy, no milchiks at all. And you should never visit a cemetery." Right? Okay, the Belzer Rebbe says, Kiddush Havdalah and red wine, no dairy, no cemetery. So, okay, Kiddush Havdalah and red. A person like that gives you counsel, you follow. He moves to New York. The previous Rebbe passes away. And he was older than the Rebbe. He was an elder chassid. He was probably in his 60s or 70s at that point. So he comes to the Rebbe with a note of supplication, opinion. So the Rebbe looks at him and says, "I'm not taking your opinion. You go to the Rebbe, to the oil. The Rebbe took pity for the young guys he took. From the boys he took. Or from the chassidim, he said, no, I'm not your Rebbe. You go to the Rebbe, the Shved." So he tells the Rebbe, "I'm not allowed to go to a cemetery." And the Rebbe says, "What kind of Meshagas is that? You're not a Kohen." So he tells him the story that he met the Belzer Rebbe. And the Belzer Rebbe, he asked if anything is bothering him. He says, "Yeah, I got top of my eye." He said, "Okay." He said, "Drink. Always make Kiddush and Havdalah and red wine, don't eat any dairy, and never visit a cemetery." So he tells this to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe tells him the following. There's no such segula. Making Kiddush, Havdalah, and red wine is well known. The dairy, I don't know. But this business of not going to a cemetery, the Belzer Rebbe made it up. But if the Belzer Rebbe made it up, you're going to do what he said. So Rabbi Ashkenazi said, "So what should I do with the pigeon?" And the Rebbe put his hand out. It was the first pigeon the Rebbe took from a chassid, the first one. So people who knew the Belzer Rebbe will tell you that the whole setup was for this. When the Belzer Rebbe told his parents that when your son comes, send him to me. And when he came, he asked him what's bothering him. And he made 3 rules. He did it all because he knew the Belzer Rebbe had that kind of Ruach HaKodesh that the Rebbe wouldn't take upon. And the Rebbe, he was going to force the Rebbe to take a pigeon by telling one of his chassidim, "You're not allowed to visit the cemetery." In other words, if you understand who the holy Belzer was, you understand that it's conceivable that he contrived the whole thing that the Rebbe should take a pigeon. And this is the first story. What's the second story? The second story is that the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, had 7 sons and 2 daughters. The second Lubavitcher Rebbe, the middle Rebbe, had 7 daughters and 2 sons. The third Lubavitcher Rebbe had 7 sons and 2 daughters. Of his 7 sons, according to Jewish law, and according to tradition, the succession belongs to the oldest. When a great rabbi of any position, a Kohen Gadol, a Melech, Nasi of Sanhedrin, a Rosh Hashiva, and a Yeshiva, passes away, the position is assumed to belong to his oldest heir if he's qualified, right? If the guy is a plumber without much seichel, then you give it to someone else. But if he's worthy, you give him the position. When the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek was nostalgic, his oldest son was entitled to be his successor. His oldest son was the Baruch Shalom. He knew his great-grandfather. He had a very strong relationship with the Alter Rebbe. He was all of 7 or 8 when the Rebbe passed away. And his whole life, he was sad from the histalkus of his Elder Zayda. He was a very deep person. And he had a very real relationship with the Alter Rebbe. And he should have been the Mamar Mokum. He should have been the Tzemach Tzedek's successor, but he wasn't. Who was the successor? The youngest, the Rebbe Marash, between Ravash and the Marash. It was so many years that Ravash had many children older than his brother. You understand? There was more than 30 years between them, or 30 years between them. The Ravash was born in, let's say, 1804. The Marash was born in 1834. And they were brothers. And they used to get married at 15, 16 years old. The Ravash had a bunch of kids, bunch of nephews and nieces older than their uncle, who would be the next Rebbe. The Tzemach Tzedek called in his oldest son, the Ravash, and said to him, "You're entitled to take my job. You're entitled. You're right. You're right. You're the birthright, the firstborn. Don't do it. Don't become a Rebbe. Leave it to someone else." And he said to him, "And I promise you, if you don't become a Rebbe, you'll get what every firstborn is entitled to, a double portion. Halachically, a firstborn gets a double portion from all the brothers. They divide the estate according to the number of brothers. The oldest gets a double portion. Rebbe says to him, don't become a Rebbe, and I promise you a double portion." And then he added some cryptai, some mysterious words. He said to him, "V'day revi yeshuhin." It'll come back to you in 4 generations. If your Tzemach Tzedek says to his oldest son, it'll come back to you in 4 generations. Anyway, he stayed in Lubavitch, this Avarach Shalom. He became a chassid of his brother, who was 30 years his junior. He passed away in Lubavitch in 1869, and he's buried in Lubavitch. They even have a tombstone now. The cemetery had been desecrated, and they're trying to find the old graves, and they're trying to rebuild it. They have a tombstone for the Ravash. But he told this to his children. He told his children what the Tzemach Tzedek had told him. Don't become a Rebbe, and I promise you double. Just to wait 4 generations. So there were a number of cousins. That means the Rebbe's father, the Rebbe's uncles, the Rebbe's cousins, his father's cousins, who saw themselves as the 4th generation. So this was in the family. It was a piece of business. The previous Rebbe became a Rebbe, but they had this tradition that in 4 generations they're supposed to come back to them. It created some kind of unpleasantness, as it were. But when the Rebbe was engaged to be married to the Rebbe Chaim Mushka, this is how the story is told. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. The Rebbe's father told the Rebbe's mother, "I miscalculated. The 4 generations don't start with the Tzemach Tzedek. The 4 generations start with the Ravash, and the Rebbe is the 4th generation." So the Rebbe's becoming a Rebbe was predicted by the Alter Rebbe, and it was predicted by the Tzemach Tzedek. You get it? That's the second story. And the third story is the most crazy of all. Evidently, and evidently means A, I don't know, B, I don't want to tell you. The Rebbe's shidduch was a very complicated affair. The Rebbe and the Rebbetzins' marriage had a lot of complications. They were engaged to be married about 5.5 or 6 years until they finally got married. Now, there were all kinds of reasons, including the fact that the previous Rebbe was almost killed by the Stalinists, and there was no money and there was no peace of mind. But there were other things that were going on behind the scenes. The Rebbe's shidduch was very complicated. It was complicated for a variety of different reasons. Like I said, a lot of it I don't know, thank God. A little bit I heard, which is probably not true anyway. I will not tell you. But the shidduch was very complicated. But the story was recently disclosed. I heard the story 25 years ago. And there's 3 separate confirmed sources for this story. In other words, people who were in the previous Rebbe's house when this happened in 1923, who were witnesses to the story. It was a known story. The Rebbe came to see the Rebbetzin. The Rebbe was 20, and the Rebbetzin was 21. By the time they got married, he was 26, and she was 27. But when they dated, they were very young, relatively young. The Rebbe was 20, and she was 21. And they met a few times. The Rebbe didn't only meet his future wife, he met his future father-in-law. The Frierdiker Rebbe writes to his daughter, "I spent a week with your chassan, and I diligently studied Parshas Mendel." And the previous Rebbe writes, "I spent this whole week studying this section of Mendel. I think I got him figured out a little," the previous Rebbe writes. "I think I got him figured out a little." And he also writes, and he's quite impressed with what he sees by us also. Anyway, the Rebbe's mother came to the previous Rebbe's house in Rostov and moved in. She spent a few weeks in the home. And she observed. She wanted to see what kind of home. She wanted to see if this is the kind of home they want their son, especially a son like this, to marry into. At the end of her visit, she went to the previous Rebbe and said to the previous Rebbe, "My husband has authorized me to agree to the shidduch. I have the power of attorney to agree to the shidduch. In other words, this was a long, long time ago when people were really, really primitive and foolish and unmodern and unwestern, unsophisticated. Parents help choose a bride for their sons, and they help choose a groom for their daughters, which is so senseless. The boy and the girl should go out and fall in love, and they should see a lot of stars, and then they'll live happily ever after, of course. But the reasonable thing of actually deciding if it makes sense, if it's sustainable, if it could work, that's really, really primitive. They were primitive, you see. That was sarcasm in case you didn't understand. The Rebbe's mother goes into the previous Rebbe and says to the previous Rebbe, I have my husband's authority to agree to the shidduch, but there's a condition. What's the condition? I need a dowry. A son-in-law like this is not free. It's going to cost you. Geld, not 50 cents, a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars. So the previous Rebbe says to the Rebbe's mother, I have no money. It was the Soviet Russia, and every dime went into Chadorim, to yeshivas. There was no money. The Rebbe lived in poverty, the previous Rebbe. So she says to her future mechutin, I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about succession. The deal is you got to tell me now that he's after you.
Oh, wow.
Which is really bold. It's so unchassidish. It's so unromantic. It's like, every Rebbe is Mashiach, and here this guy comes along and says, forget Mashiach, he's next. A lot of Chassidim are unhappy that the story is even told, but it's published in books today. It's not only is undeniable, the story is out there. So the Rebbe agrees. The previous Rebbe agrees. So she says to the previous Rebbe, I want it in writing. And the Rebbe says, in writing, I'm not giving it to you. I'm not putting it in there. I can't. So different Chassidim, different sources of the story have different suffixes, what the Rebbe said. And I think they could both be true. One person said that the Rebbe said, Chassidim will allein verstehen. The Chassidim will know themselves that the Rebbe is the next Rebbe, which is, of course, how it played out. And the other end is that the Rebbe said in Yiddish, by uns, a word is a word. By us, by tzaddikim, a word is a word. In other words, most people, if I tell you I'm going to do something for you, even if I say I promise, I have no halachic obligation, none, because words are nothing. If we shake hands, for example, and especially if we raise a kerchief like you do by avot, by elachayim, you just bound it with an action. But words, the Gemara calls it pitputim milah b'alma. Words are nothing. But by tzaddikim, by kedusha, words are as powerful as an action. So the previous Rebbe says to the Rebbe's mother, I give you my word. No. But my words are as good as an action. Right? Now, this really is a source of a lot of complications because other people were screaming, since when do you do this? You negotiate before you get married. You give me next seven. There's 3 daughters, there's 3 son-in-laws. How do you, what's this? But that was the deal. The previous Rebbe agreed. Why? Because the previous Rebbe was a pretty smart guy, and the previous Rebbe understood that he's not getting 3 son-in-laws like this. The sons are all wonderful people, very holy, righteous people. But a Rebbe is there. He's getting one like this. But it created trouble. Now, fast forward 27 years. The Rebbe and the Rebbe's finally get married. And the word finally is very apropos. They make it into New York. And the Rebbe, who had for years, avoided being near his father-in-law, staying away from the previous Rebbe, for the simple reason that he wanted to learn and daven. The Rebbe wanted to spend time with himself. Being near the previous Rebbe would have been day and night. He's busy with the stuff going on. He would visit for Yom Tif. The Rebbe came for Yom Tif to the previous Rebbe, Pesach and Tishrei. And whenever the Rebbe was around the previous Rebbe, he acted like a son-in-law. He was makar of everybody. He brought everybody in. He made everybody feel welcome. He did his job as a son-in-law, but all year he was away from the previous Rebbe. Then he comes to New York, and when the Rebbe arrives in New York, that whole situation is reversed. It became literally one soul and 2 bodies. The Rebbe and the previous Rebbe became so enmeshed. The Frierdiker was very limited physically. But the Frierdiker's will was extraordinarily powerful, and his clarity and his judgment and his intuition and his Ruach HaKodesh were extraordinary. But he was not able to do the things that he accomplished if not for the fact that his son-in-law stood by his side and brought forward what it was the previous Rebbe wanted and needed, in spite of the fact that he was so physically limited. And the Rebbe became a complete servant of his father-in-law. Every minute of his day and night was dedicated to looking after his father-in-law, push it physically, took care of his medical conditions. and also seeing through the work that the Rebbe wanted done. And then the Rebbe passes away. The Rebbe passes away, so Rabbi Dubov tells the Rebbe 3 days in, until now it was the Rebbe, and now it's you, and the Rebbe snaps back, the Rebbe leapt. And the whole year of negotiating went on. There's a lot of different negotiations. But one of the stories is that Rabbi Zalman Garari went over to the Rebbe and says to the Rebbe, I really, really don't understand you. He says, I was an orphan. He tells the Rebbe, I was an orphan. My father had died when I was very little. And I was raised in the previous Rebbe's home. I grew up in the previous Rebbe's house. I was there when your mother came. I was there when your mother went into the Rebbe. I was there when your mother came out of the Rebbe and reported that the Rebbe had agreed to the Shidduch on the condition that you would be the next Rebbe. So what's all this hesitation? You understand? He says to the Rebbe, verstehe that I was in the house when your mother visited and she negotiated with the previous Rebbe that you should be the next Rebbe. So what's this hesitation? This has been predestined. It was determined 27 years ago. Now, it actually was determined 100 years before that and 50 years before that. But this is like the third story. What's this hesitation? What the Rebbe said, very plain English, plain Yiddish, but everybody who speaks English understands it. I didn't hear it from the Rebbe. Ich habe nicht gehört von Shver. The Rebbe didn't tell it. And there's something unbelievably deep and important in those few words. Something unbelievably deep and important in those few words. And this goes to the idea of chassid. You know, before you're a Rebbe, you're a chassid. And the chassid-Rebbe relationship is the deepest relationship in the world. Because it's a relationship not just of mind, and heart, and body, it's a relationship of soul and soul. And when you're as great a soul as the Rebbe, and you're intimately involved with as great a soul as the previous Rebbe, those two souls are deeply enmeshed, they're deeply locked in. So you come to the Rebbe and you say to the Rebbe, you're the next Rebbe because you're the great-grandson of the Tzemach Tzedek. You know what he answers? Not interested. Not interested. You come to the Rebbe, you know, you're the next Rebbe because the Alter Rebbe predicted that there's going to be another Menachem and you happen to be Menachem. You know what the Rebbe answers? Not interested. You come to the Rebbe, your parents negotiated before you got married that you're going to be the next Rebbe. You know what the Rebbe answers? Not interested. So what's it going to take? There's only one person whose instruction I follow, and that's my Rebbe. He never told me. That's the meaning of those words. He never told me. He never told me that I'm going to be a Rebbe, so there's nothing to talk about. This went on for several months. People said to the Rebbe, everybody knows you're supposed to be the Rebbe. There was only one candidate, honestly, truthfully, objectively, and the Rebbe finished. And his big excuse is, so after a few months, the Chassidim Pasha had enough of it. You know, how many times are you going to say the same excuse? Come up with a new one. So on Lag BaOmer, you can figure from Yud Shevat to Lag BaOmer, Lag BaOmer is in Iyar. Shvat, Oder, Nis, Iyar. It's about 3 months and 10 days. 100 days after Peter passed away, circa. A bunch of Chassidim went to the oil and they said to the previous Rebbe, would you tell him? This has got to stop, you know. Tell him. The Chassidim all asked him to be a Rebbe, and all the Chassidim wanted to be a Rebbe, and his answer to our plight, to our request, to our desire is the Rebbe never told me. And talking to the Rebbe, talking to our wall, he was an incredibly strong-willed man. And he said no was no. And no doesn't mean if you'll try harder, he'll change his mind. No meant you're wasting your time. Anyway, the Rebbe went to the oil that day on Lag BaOmer. Never use that excuse again. Never use that excuse again. That one was gone. He had other ones. But that excuse that he didn't hear from the Shver was over. But this little story reveals something very, very deep and important. And it reveals something deep and important, which is not just a nice piece of history, but it's an insight into the Chassid-Rebbe relationship. The Rebbe's mother was living in New York. The Rebbe's mother was living in New York. The Rebbe's mother knew from her husband that the Rebbe is supposed to be a Rebbe. There was no doubt in her mind. And I'm sure she shared that information with the Rebbe quite generously and probably more than once. And the Rebbe was so respectful of his mother. The Rebbe was incredibly respectful of his mother. But at the same time, he didn't take orders from her. The Rebbe didn't even take orders from his father, who was a Gadol B'Yisrael. The Rebbe's mother used to say to people, I know he's more his father-in-law than he is my husband. I got the picture. I'm not a fool. His Rebbe is not his father. His Rebbe is a Frierdiker Rebbe. And everything that the Rebbe did had to be through the previous Rebbe. And the previous Rebbe didn't tell him, then it just wasn't going to happen. There's a fascinating letter from the Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, written to a Jew who lived in Chicago, whose name was Yankel Katz. Yankel Katz, I remember Yankel Katz. He was a clean-shaven man. He was a businessman, a multimillionaire. And he lived like a pauper, lived in an apartment, mamish, like a middle class. His money belonged, the man was worth millions. The Rebbe had in his drawer an entire checkbook of pre-signed checks with no amounts. And the Rebbe wrote whatever he wanted. And he covered the checks. His children did not know they were wealthy until they were adults. They thought they were poor people because that's how they lived. His daughter says to him, Papa, you have all this money, we can't afford to buy a house. And he would say, I'm a steward. The money isn't mine. I'm a shliach. The money has been given to me to distribute. He was very, very close to the Rebbe. So in 1943, he was involved in building a new Chabad shul in Chicago, which still exists today, called B'nai Yeruve. The shul has moved more than once or twice.
I know that shul.
Yeah, but it was in a different location then. So he writes to the previous Rebbe a letter and says, we want to inaugurate the shul, and we decided that the guest of honor for the event of the inauguration of the shul is going to be your son-in-law, the Ramash, the Rebbe. Now, why did he write this to the Frierdiker Rebbe? Why? Because he was hoping the previous Rebbe would tell the Rebbe to go. So the previous Rebbe writes back to Yankel Katz. He says, I need to tell you something. My son-in-law is not a pushover. I need to warn you that he may not cooperate with what you desire, which was the previous Rebbe was saying, I'm not going to tell him to go. If he goes, he's going to go because he chooses to go. But if I know him, he's not going to Chicago. And he says to him, my son-in-law is very strong-willed, and he has to decide himself whether he's going to do something or not. So if he refuses you, don't take it personally. It's just who he is. And then the Rebbe adds, but I want you to know, I have from him so much nachas. He gives me so much satisfaction, so much. And the Rebbe goes on, the previous Rebbe, to list a whole bunch of wonderful traits about the Rebbe, because he didn't want Yankel Katz to hold it against the Rebbe, that he refused him. And the Rebbe did not go to Chicago. He absolutely did not go to Chicago. But so the Rebbe writes, the previous Rebbe writes to this Yankel Katz, you should just understand that he may not cooperate with you, but he's the real deal. He's my favorite. I love him and he loves me. The bond between the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe was so deep, was a very, very deep spiritual bond. From the previous Rebbe's end as a father-in-law and as a Rebbe to a chassid, and from the Rebbe's end as a son-in-law and as a chassid to a Rebbe. And the Rebbe took his marching orders from the previous Rebbe, period. That's it. And he was not going to sit on the throne of Lubavitch because the Alter Rebbe came to someone in a dream. He was not going to sit on the throne of Lubavitch because he was whatever number of generations from the Tzemach Tzedek's oldest child. He was not going to sit on the throne of Lubavitch because his parents negotiated as a condition to the Shidduch. He was going to sit on the throne of Lubavitch because that chair belonged to the Rebbe, the Shved, to the previous Rebbe, who told him, sit, this is now yours. You should know that when the Rebbe became Rebbe, he was impossible. I wasn't around, but you hear the stories. He was impossible. He took on a workload which no Rebbe ever did. He worked day and night. The Rebbe would sit in his room, work all day long, and then at night, from 8 o'clock at night, sometimes till 6, 7 in the morning, 3 times a week, he would see people, the Yechidas. The Rebbe worked unbelievably hard. And the story goes means maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, but it's interesting. That the Rebbe's wife, the Rebbe Chaya Mushka, called to her home, the president of New York at the time, 3 senior chassidim. And she said to them as follows. She says, all the Rebbitzins, all the wives of the Rebbes looked after their husbands. They made sure they ate and slept. And they took care of the Pashut. When the Rebbe took a haircut, the barber, the Rebbitzin came to make sure the haircut was good. When the Rebbe was fitted for a new kapata, the Rebbe bought shoes. The Rebbe didn't go to the store. They brought the shoes to his office. She was there to make sure that it looked good. She made sure the hat sat good on his head and the kapata was right fit. She took care of him physically, and he allowed her to do it. I mean, it's cute to think the barber comes to the Rebbe's office in 770, and she's there making sure that the haircut is perfect. Yeah, the mamish, that's how it was. The tailor came, and she was there making sure the kapata fit. It shouldn't be too big, it shouldn't be too small, it should sit right. And she understood fashion. She made made sure it was right. The Rebbetzin took care of the Rebbe. But she said to these three Hasidim the following: the Rebbetzins always were able to tell their husbands when it's enough. You need to say when they have to stop and rest. That I can't do. I'll look after him, but I'm not going to stop him. That's on you. But the Rebbe was unstoppable. But when you hear the stories, what you gather is like this. If the Rebbe is sitting in a fabreng in public, and he's been sitting there for 10 hours, and he's pushing himself, and you walk over to the Rebbe in public and say to the Rebbe, maybe it's time to retire, the Rebbe would put you in your place in the kind of way that you would think you'd never get out of your seat again. Because it was disrespectful. It wasn't the right time and place. If you asked for a meeting in private and you discussed with the Rebbe's health, the Rebbe was actually quite open to the suggestions of Hasidim. And there's a pattern of this. I think it's a pattern. But sometimes there's many reasons why. And perhaps one of the reasons is because of a little bit of a lack of respect. The Rebbe was in a situation where someone would say to the Rebbe in the middle of a public gathering, I think you got to stop. And the Rebbe pushed back every time. The Rebbe was, okay, maybe you're right. Never. And by the earlier Rebbeim, the wife would do that, or the mother would do that. And the Rebbe would usually say, okay, if the wife says I got to stop, I got to stop. You couldn't stop the Rebbe. There's actually audio tapes that you can hear. It's late in a Fabrengen. And one of the senior Chassidim who had this job, it was their responsibility, but it was an impossible job, would get out of his seat and he very gingerly and full of fear would tiptoe over to the Rebbe and whisper something to the Rebbe that maybe it's time. The Benkel. He would speak about that a lot. The Benkel. The person sitting on the chair is whoever he is, but the chair is gigantic. The Rebbe's whole identity as a Rebbe was his link to his Rebbe. And everything about him communicated that. In other words, we were his Chassidim, he was a Chassid of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and he shoved the Frierdiker Rebbe down our throats. He really did it. We didn't like it, you know. The Rebbe said thousands of times, the Rebbe, the Shved, the Sidereno, the Rebbe, my father, the Nasi of our generation, and we would just blot out the word, the Shved, the Rebbe, the Sidereno. But the Rebbe never said, I'm the Rebbe. It was always the Rebbe, the Shved, the Frierdiker Rebbe, because that was his anchor. You know, the story they told the Rebbe should go to the oil less because of his health. And the Rebbe said, you ask questions, you want answers? You ask medical questions, you ask business questions, you ask shlichus questions, about chinuch questions. You want answers? If you want answers, I need oil. That's where I got the information. You want answers? I need oil. I need to go to the Frierdiker Rebbe and download whatever. I don't know what's going on about oil. I don't exactly know what the Rebbe needs. If he can talk to the previous Rebbe, when there's a stone standing above him, he can probably talk to him 770 also. But the Rebbe, I need oil. The Chassidim asked the Rebbe to reduce Yechidus, and the Rebbe said, I already reduced it from 3 times a week to twice a week. They asked the Rebbe to shorten the Fabrengen. My father told me that when he was a boy, Fabrengen started at 8:30 in the morning, and it was perfectly normal to go to 4 or 5 in the morning, 4 or 5, 8:30 in the evening, 10 hours, 11 hours. And at some point, they were reduced to just 3:30. They asked the Rebbe to make very sure, and he did. Yeah? And then they said to the Rebbe should go to the ILS. So the Rebbe made 2 comments. He said, first of all, visiting was wonderful. In those days, there was nobody in the cemetery. It was empty. There were trees. There were 5 buried people. Lubavitch was, now you can't find a spot. You know, they say you're dying to get in. It's just stones and stones and stones. I remember as a child, as a kid, there were literally trees. There was just open fields. There was nobody buried. Everybody was alive. So he says it's a very pleasant experience. They're going to a garden, they're going to a park, you know. And there was an old chassid who frequently would visit the oil. And he says, ask Reb Zalman. He visited the previous episode. He says, it's a wonderful experience. It's just fine, you know. It's cool. It's okay. It's not so terrible. But I need oil, you know. And this is how the Rebbe sees himself. He's sitting on the seat. He's successor of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Now, as it relates to us, And obviously, each of you are in a different position than I am. I'm older than you, and I was born here. And this may sound like a funny thing to say, but I'm pretty grown up. Or to say it alternatively, I'm not going to get more grown up than I am now. When I was your age, I wasn't grown up. I was a little boy, a big body and a very, very big mouth, but not a lot of wisdom. And what I have learned over the course of my life is how personal a Chassid Rebbe relationship is. The Rebbe is not like the President of the United States. He's not even the president of a corporation. He's not somebody who's in the top of a pyramid whose relationship with you is remote. In other words, that he's got this whole vision. He's put a bunch of people in place to make it happen. And those bunch of people have got a bunch of people who are beneath them who are seeing it through. And we're somewhere down the totem pole, I don't know, 6 or 7 steps away. That's not how Hasidus works. It's how most businesses work. It's most community structures work. The Chassid Rebbe relationship is individual and personal for each Chassid. You know, there's a Yid, I mean, he's not a classmate of mine, but I guess he's a friend of mine. He'll certainly say I'm his friend. We grew up together. He's a little older than I am. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia, where Coca-Cola has its headquarters. After Gimel Thomas, Coca-Cola called him in for a meeting and said, tell us the model. What's the business model? Coca-Cola wants to know how to mimic Lubavitch. What's the marketing strategy? How does it work? What's the answer? The answer is every employee works for the president directly. You can't duplicate that. Why? The president doesn't even know your name. He doesn't even know you exist. He knows your boss's boss's boss. And he sits and drinks tea or whatever, whiskey with him and smokes a cigar and they talk nonsense. And they say, how many people did I employ? Are you responsible? 1,200. And then the guy underneath him, and how many people did I employ? 500. And then you got the guy above you. I'm responsible for 12 of your employees. Yeah, send them my regards. That's not how this operates. The Rebbe is big enough to have a personal relationship with every little person. But it's complicated. You know why it's complicated? Because it's personal. I don't know you. I really don't know any of you. I don't know where you stand and how you feel. And if you don't want to be a chassid, that's your choice. You know, if you don't want to be in the Lubavitch, that's your choice. But if this is what you want, this is a goal that you have to set for yourself. That will take a long time. I say it takes years and years and years and years and years. Become a chassid of the Rebbe, which means personalize your relationship. Now, the unfortunate fact is you've never met him. You see videos, right? If you're fortunate, some Jew had mercy on you and gave you one of those priceless dollars that people have in stacks like this. You know, here's a dollar. And you cry and you fell and the dollar is worth to you all the money in the world. How this is accomplished, I don't know. But that it needs to be accomplished is a certitude. The Rebbe Chassid relationship is a personal, intimate connection on the simplest of levels between two people. Now, you're going to be married, you can have a husband. The Mitzvah Hashem, it should just work. It should be healthy, and it should be normal, and it should be successful and sophisticated, and you should love each other, and you should have the healthiest children, and you should have so much parnasa, you should do good things, and it should all be wonderful. I mean it with my whole heart. Yeah? And you can have a relationship with your husband. You have a relationship with your father, and a relationship with your mother, a relationship with your brothers, a relationship with your sisters, and you will have a relationship with your children. All of these relationships have dynamics, and the dynamics have to do with intimacy, how close you could be. But you know what? Intimacy has to do with how big a person people are. There are people in this world who, for whatever reasons, it doesn't really matter why, aren't capable of intimacy. I know adult men, and I will embrace them. I will hug them. It's like hugging a rag doll. Not only they can't hug back, they're unhuggable. It's sad. It's tragic. Because these people, whatever the reasons are not capable of being close. And ultimately, it has to do with the brain. To be close to another person, you have to have space for them. A bigger person is capable of greater intimacy because he has far, far more space to get close to another person. And the person you marry, in Mitzvah Hashem, will be capable of intimacy. You'll be able to be close, not just because you're married, but because you're able to share everything because of each one of your health. You cannot be intimate with another person unless you're going to realize, this is not a psychology class, but it's common sense, unless you're capable of vulnerability, of being open. And it has to do with self-trust. And some people are afraid of that. And it makes it very, very tricky. The Rebbe is so big and he's so healthy that he has the capacity for intimacy with thousands of people. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't. But it is true. Because if you've been around Lubavitch, certainly from the people who knew the Rebbe, including my generation, how many words did I exchange with Lubavitch Rebbe in my entire life? How many words? You can't make a paragraph out of it. I was so afraid of him. I was so ashamed of him. I never opened my mouth. And my father, the Rebbe knew. My father, the Rebbe spent time with. I would walk by and he would give me a bracha and I would sort of hide my face without hiding my face. I remember when I was getting married, I told the Rebbe, I'm getting married tomorrow. I'm getting married tomorrow. 4 words. Yeah? So the Rebbe gave me a second dollar and that was the end of that. I didn't have conversations with the Rebbe. I have a few moments. I have my moments that are meaningful to me, but I don't have a lot. I don't have a lot, but I have a very personal relationship with the Rebbe. I have a very personal relationship with the Rebbe. And for me personally, that relationship was the Rebbe's eyes. I figured out at a certain point that you have to look at the Rebbe and try to make eye contact. The Rebbe's eyes spoke. They spoke not the way a normal person's eyes speak. He looked at you. When people look at each other very closely, there's a weird feeling, because it's almost like an invasion. So seriously, you don't really look at other people. You look at them, you look in their direction, you don't want to make it look. When you look into another person's eyes and they look back, it feels weird. Hopefully with your husband, it won't feel weird. The Rebbe didn't have that problem. He looked straight through you. And you couldn't look back, not because there was a lack of intimacy, but because there was too much intimacy. He looked at you and talked to you. Those eyes showed the happiness when you were doing well as a chassid. Those eyes showed disappointment when you weren't doing well as a chassid. Those shy eyes knew when there was something you needed to do that we're not getting around to do. And you know how much time those eyes touched yours? Literally a fraction of a second. A piece of 1 second. But it was a whole conversation. Now, you can tell me I'm making it up. You can tell me I'm in a cult. Whatever you wish. But you're not going to change my mind. Because this is my experience. And I had this experience many times. The Rebbe sits in a room of thousands of people. And between the talks, he's looking around. He's having conversations with people at a speed it's not supersonic. It's faster than the speed of light. It's not fast as the speed of light because his eyes were good. It was incredibly rapid. But it looks like just hello, hello, hello. It ain't so, people. Every person at that Fabrengen knew that there's a connection, there's an intimacy between the Rebbe and themselves. It's very private. And nobody was allowed to be there because the Rebbe made you feel very naked. You couldn't cover up. But around the Rebbe, you were open, totally open. And it was hard enough that just he and you knew whatever it was that the conversation was. But other people, but it was his magic. He said, Rebbe, this incredible neshama who connected to so many people. And we had personal relationships with him, personal relationships. The kind of relationship you have with your father, the kind of relationship you have with the people you're really close to and really comfortable with. You were never comfortable with the Rebbe, but you were so delighted that he was in your life. It was so important that the Rebbe was your Rebbe and you were his chazan. I was in Boston a couple of months ago. And there's a man there who was around my age. We were in yeshiva at the same time. But he didn't have my background. He was a Baal Tshuva. I mean, my father spent an hour with the Rebbe. An hour in one evening, not over the course of his years. The Rebbe was his therapist. My father was an orphan, and the Rebbe looked after him like he looked after children. The Rebbe's relationship with Chassidim in the early years, but especially those who came from difficult situations. He was a Baal Tshuva. And I was in Boston, and I was saying similar things to what I'm saying right now. So he pulled me aside. He said, I have two stories, two moments. Simple little things. He says when the boys had a break, he would go into the Beis HaMedrash and learn Rambam. And he would sit in the Zal, and the Rebbe would come out of his office and go into the elevator to go downstairs for Mincha. And he was able to tell that the Rebbe was going downstairs for Mincha because the boys who were watching the Rebbe's door, which is the Rebbe, they will run down, he would follow them. There was an occasion, I don't know what it was, but he was sitting in the Zal, there was nobody in the Zal. And the Rebbe walked out of his room to go into the elevator, and he didn't have his normal signals that the Rebbe was leaving. The Rebbe walked into the Beis Medrash and just looked at him. And basically saying, I'm going down to Mincha. Because the Rebbe knew that he would wait for other people to be aware that the Rebbe was going into the elevator, but that day there was nobody there. So he just walked into the Beis HaMedrash and looked at him. Simple thing. But what did that tell him? That the Rebbe knew he was there. He was a Baal Tshuva. His father wasn't a chassid, his mother wasn't a chassid. He didn't have a fancy last name. He didn't have a lot of money. Many people would not have noticed him. And the Rebbe was telling him, I know you're here. And his second story, it's a simpler story, it was Simchas Torah. The shul was packed with people. And he didn't know the order of events. He simply didn't know what you do next. The davening of Simchas Torah is very upside down. You do Birchas Kainim and Shacharis. Then you say Hallel. And then you do Hakafis. And then you lane. So he's standing maybe 25 feet from the Rebbe, 20 feet from the Rebbe. And after they finish Hallel, he opens up a Siddur and he starts to say Ataresa, which is for laning, which you don't do. You first do Hakafis. The Rebbe looks across at him and sort of tells him with his eyes, we're not doing that now. We're going to do something else now. And he got the message. It's such a simple thing. But what the Rebbe was saying to this man who joined the community as an individual, which is very hard. The hardest thing being about tshuva, and you know this personally, and you'll know it more when you get married. The hardest part of being about tshuva is not having family. It's hell. You're in Lubavitch, and you have your friends, you have your circle, but you're by yourself. And the Rebbe let him know. He told us to me now that these were his moments. The Rebbe was letting him know, I know you're here. It's unbelievably, it makes you feel like $1 million. There's thousands of people in the room, and the Rebbe looks at you. And when the Rebbe looked at you, there was no doubt. If you were not sure he was looking at you, he wasn't, because the Rebbe's eyes were so powerful. They were like lasers. If he looked at you, you knew he was looking at you. And he just sent him a simple message. We're not doing laning now. We're doing Hakafis now. Not a big deal. But what the Rebbe was saying is, I know you're there. So what I'm saying to you is, this is a free choice. Being a chassid is a free choice. It is a choice. It's an option. But if you choose that you be a chassid, the meaning of being a chassid is having a Rebbe. And there's no other candidates at the moment. In other words, it's post Gimel Tammuz. I get that. But there's one Rebbe. And you need to appreciate several things. And probably the most important thing, it takes time to become a chassid. In other words, it doesn't take time to learn Hasidus. It doesn't take time to try to leave it like this. But it takes time to develop a personal relationship with a man you never met. It's real. It's not real because you're so spiritual. It's real because he's so gigantic. He's so big that you will learn that there's room in his heart for you, there's room in his soul for you in the kind of way that you'll know that you're in his soul. But it's real, it's work, it's avoida, it's a decision initially. And then it's obviously trying to do the things that Rebbe says, but over the course of your life, the Rebbe will become more and more, not just realer and realer, more and more personal. He'll be your Rebbe and you'll be his chassid, and you'll know it and he'll know it, and nobody else needs to know. It's a challenge. What I'm saying to you is a challenge. And I'm not saying to you that you must do it. I'm saying to you that you must think about it. I'm just going to give you an example. My mother does not come from a Lubavitch home. My father's friends all married non-Lubavitch girls because there simply were no Lubavitch girls in America to marry. There were a couple, but they were chopped up real quick, you understand? My mother came from a modern Orthodox home. A very beautiful home. My grandfather was a beautiful Jew. My grandmother was a giantess. My mother was a great lady. But they were not Chassidim. They're very American. Americans are fair. Americans are honest. Americans are straightforward. And New Yorkers, on top of that, are no nonsense. Now, Chassidus is fair and straight and upfront and no nonsense. Maybe it's fair and straight, but Chassidus is full of nonsense, full of all kinds of shtick. Now, my grandfather and my grandmother, their grandparents were Chassidim, but not Chabad Chassidim. They were Chassidim of the Tzanzer Rebbe's kids. I'm finishing in a minute. The children of the Divrei Chaim. This is a different kind of, it's a Galician Chassidus. It's a different style of Chassidus, a whole different form, a whole different Chassid Rebbe relationship. Chabad was very weird. My mother had no idea what Chassidus was. My grandfather knew that his grandfather was a Chassid, but my grandfather did not consider himself a Chassid at all. But he'd seen Chassidim. The greatest influence in his life was his Rosh Yeshiva, Mr. Mendlovich. He was a Chassid. But the Chassidus that he gave the guys was a little bit of warmth, a little bit of joy, a little bit of saying l'chaim, but there was no Chassid Rebbe relationship. There was none of that. And my mother met my father, and they got married. My mother had a hard time with Chassidus. She had a hard time with the way of life. She had a hard time with how frum and whacked out we were. She had a very, very hard time when we started going to school. And my father did not want us to learn the word Echol, at least to a certain age. We didn't learn any English. It was very hard for my mother. What do you mean? You raise kids in America, teach them how to read and write. And my father and her, when we turned 9 years old, we went to a different yeshiva, so we learned English because my mother just wouldn't have it. But that was just me and my brother. The two younger boys, she was done. It was cooked. Whatever you want, no English, yeah, English. But she struggled with being a chassid for many years. And there's a lot of details to the struggle. I'm not going to tell you all. But ultimately, it wasn't only about listening to the Rebbe. Listening to the Rebbe, she could do. But she didn't want to fear him. She didn't want to see him as the thing in her life which made life harder for her. It took her a long time to develop a relationship with the Rebbe. In other words, a relationship with the Rebbe means that my relationship with my Rebbe is not, he's the guy who gives rules and orders and I got to follow even when I don't want to. But this is good for me. It took her a very long time, until my adolescence, until my teen years, for my mother to be not just a chassid in the sense I do what the Rebbe says, but that I have this intimate and personal relationship with the Rebbe. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. You start by learning the Rebbe's Torah. You start by doing the things the Rebbe encourages us to do, to live the way the Rebbe wants to live. You make frequent visits to the Oihel. You have fabrengens occasionally where you talk about spiritual things. But over time, you want to develop a relationship with the Rebbe where you know that the relationship is personal and intimate. It's a goal. It's a goal. It's a purpose. It's an end. Yeah? Okay, I got to let you go because the food's getting cold and the cook is getting nervous. Okay, yeah, I came late. Thank you. Yeah, so be well. Thank you for your class. I came so late.
Hello? Hello?
Yep.
Sorry, could we just ask the girls to turn the Zoom on at 1?
I cannot hear you. Say that again, please.
Can we turn the Zoom at 1?
Rabbi, where can I find this recording of the shear?
Send me an email, I'll send it to you, and I'm probably going to edit and put it on. So send me an email. You know the email address?
I have your email. I have your card.
I'll send you.
Okay, expect an email from Neely. Hello?
Hi, it's Esther. Can we turn the Zoom at 1 for Rabbi Majeski's class?
At what time?
1 o'clock, 1 to 3.
I will try to remember, but write it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.